This episode has been recorded as a part of the previous Healthy Habits podcast. We've decided to keep it now under the name Joyful, as the topics we've discussed remain extremely relevant, and it's just such a shame to miss out on this valuable conversation we had. Enjoy! You've survived the endless meetings and conquer the chaos at work. You step into your cozy apartment and the clock strikes 6:30 p.m. Rain taps on your window and a cold breeze fills the air. The last thing on your mind is a workout, but guess what? You've already skipped 2 sessions this week and you made a solemn promise to yourself. Today, rain or shine, you're hitting the pavement for that run. This situation is probably very familiar to many of us. Do you go for a workout or do you stay in? Today we are in Grenoble, France, and I have the opportunity to interview Cyril Forestier. Cyril has a PhD in sports science titled Behaviours and Self-Control on Individuals with Cardiovascular Diseases. He obtained his degree at the University of Grenoble Alpes and he followed his career in academia for the next couple of years, working on engagement in healthy behaviors related, for instance, to physical activity or food choices. In May 2003, he decided to quit academia and started his own business. Passionate about trail running and sports, he is a personal trainer and the author of Courir Mieux, a blog, website, Instagram and podcast where he brings you information and shares his knowledge about good training practices. In today's episode, we discuss willpower and motivation for training, whether it's okay to reward yourself with a delicious pizza after a good workout, and why it is difficult to resist temptations. We also talk about the lights and shadows of work in academia and discuss questionable research practices. Which articles can you trust? I had a lovely time talking to Cyril, and I hope that you will enjoy our conversation. Listen until the very end if you want to find out about the challenge from our guest. Are you ready? Tune in with Healthy Habits Podcast. Hello, Cyril.
Hello, Anastasia.
Thank you very much for the invitation. So thank you for having me here in Grenoble. So first thing that I wanted to talk to you about is your career path, because I found that recently you've decided to quit academia and start your own activity. So I wanted to congratulate you on this difficult decision that you've made, because I know that it takes a lot of courage to decide to change directions in life. So could you tell me, why did you decide to start your own activity, and why did you quit?
So first, thank you for the interview, and I'm glad to be here and discuss with you. The very first thing, and I think it will be quite easy for you to understand why I changed my mind. As an assistant professor, I decided to quit. As you can see, we live in Grenoble, and if now we are recording, but if you put your eyes higher, you can see that there is mountain all around, and mountains, and living on the mountains in one of the main reasons I quit. It can sound weird because it's just a living place, but it was a part of my own individual balance, personal balance, life, work balance, or call it as you want. And so this was one of the reasons.
Mm-hmm. Because your work, where was it? Your position as a research assistant?
So I did my PhD in Grenoble, and then I moved in Germany for the postdoc, and then I moved to Le Mans in France, and then in another position in Nantes in France. So I've been 2 assistant professors 2 times. In France, there is a concours. I don't know how you say it in English, but so I did the concours 2 times and get 2 positions. And so it is a bit more complicated than just the location, because there is obviously in my decision there was the location, but there was the fact that what I found on the job in the academia didn't compensate anymore the living far from where I like to live.
But you don't come from Grenoble, right? So
No, I come from Nice. I come from Nice, and I spent 4 years in Grenoble, 24 in Nice, and yes.
Okay, but you loved Grenoble so much that when you were doing your PhD, when you had the position as a researcher in Nantes, you thought that you have to go back here.
Yes, exactly. But maybe all the podcasts I will discuss things like that, so I can start right now. But for me, there is a lot of in life. There is a lot of balance things, and in every type of decision and things you can do, behavior you can adopt or not. It's a balance, and sometimes just the balance goes on a direction, and here you go. And when I was, for example, in Nice and in Grenoble, I was doing my study, I was doing my PhD, and the balance was balanced. For me, I lived somewhere I liked, I was doing research and I loved it, and so it was fine, and I was good with it. Then I moved, for example, to Nantes, and the balance started to be not balanced anymore. So the job was not what I was expecting in academia. It wasn't something I liked, and it wasn't anymore something I trust in. And it can sound weird, but I wasn't trusting science anymore, or less than when I was a PhD student. And in the other end, I didn't found in my life where I lived something that compensate for what I lost on the job.
Okay, understand.
And so I decided to quit.
And what was your research subject when you were in Nantes? What did you work on?
So I work on the same thing almost on all my research career. I work on health behavior change and psychological determinants of behaviors change. For example, what could lead individuals that are sedentary or with a high history of sedentary behavior to turn physically active. How individual can stop an healthy diet and prefer healthy diet. So things like that. Maybe this is why I told you about balance just before, because for me it's the same thing. So how can you balance, for example, behaviors, physical activity and sedentary, or good healthy diet and unhealthy diet?
Okay, and where did this interest come from? What do you think? When did you start being interested in this topic of why do we change behavior, why do we engage in physical activity, and so on?
It is super funny for me to answer because I wasn't interested in it at all when I started.
When you started the PhD?
Yes, the PhD. I was doing research stuff on master degree, first and second year, about stereotypes and how perceived, for example, just find the word. Perceived disability leads to some judgments about physical, sports competence, social warmth, things like that. And I wanted to do a PhD about it, but there was no grant. And I just heard about a grant that was available at Grenoble about health behavior change, and I applied and I get the position. So I get the position, I guess, because I had on my career, on my lectures, a big class about health behavior. And so I talk about it, and I think I was the good candidate. So I get the position, and I spend a whole year thinking, okay, this is my PhD topic. I don't like it. I don't want to work about it. But I need a PhD to become assistant professor, because since my what's the name in English? Since my bachelor degree, I wanted to be an assistant professor. That was the work I wanted to.
So you knew you wanted to work in research.
Exactly. So everything on my mind was focused on becoming assistant professor. So I just thought it's just a PhD. I need one. It will be on health behavior, but then I will come back to stereotypes and stuff like that. But the second year of the PhD, after a whole year and a summer break, when I started again, I don't know why I was passionate about my topic, and maybe because I started to be more free on my PhD, be more able to understand the literature, be more able to manipulate the construct, and it became my topic, and I started to love it.
Okay. I understand. And where did you do your masters? Because I forgot.
My topic, you mean?
Your masters. Where did you do your masters?
Where? Sorry, in Nice. In
Okay.
Nice, in the sports science, the sports faculty in Nice.
Okay, so today you're in Grenoble and you're enjoying life. It's a beautiful city. I've never been to Grenoble before, but when I came today, I was really astonished by how remarkable the city is. And did your passion for trail begin in Grenoble, or did you like this sport before?
No. I did sports all my life, and sports in mountain particularly all my life. Since I think I was 8 or 9 years old when I started to compete in ski. So I did it for many years. I stopped the classic college in France. So it's when you are something...
Secondary school?
Yes, when you are something like 11 years old. I stopped at 12 or 13 years old, I stopped going to school. And I started classes remotely. So because I was skiing and competing all the time and
so
training.
You're professional.
You can't call it professional because, for example, I wasn't earning money or anything about it, but I was training like maybe 7-on-7. So it was on a club, so it was a high level ski, and I did it until my 18. At 18, as many people that train a lot, I wasn't succeeding because there is a lot of champion and there is not so much champion compared to the quantity of people that train. So I wasn't one. It's okay. I wasn't frustrating, but I just stopped at this moment because I wasn't thinking about work on ski. It was really a passion, a sport, but not the work I wanted to accomplish. And I start sports studies. And then I stopped skiing. I start to hike. So I discovered the mountain in another way, just still the mountain, but differently. And I hike a lot with traditional hiking pack. So you have a lot of stuff and you hike. And then I hike more quickly. And then I thought that I just don't need some things. And I reduced the size of my bag and I did more kilometers and it became trail running.
Okay, very interesting.
So a lot of time in mountains.
And why were you so passionate about the mountains? I think in Nice you don't have mountains, right? You have to travel a bit.
You have small mountains that are quite close to the city. But if you want what I call real mountains, you have to go by car for an hour, something like that. So yes.
Okay.
And what I like about it is just that it's peaceful. It's the first thing that come in my mind. It's calm and you can think and be just calm in a natural environment, and that's quite whole, and it's quite simple. Many times you don't need, so it's a bit funny to say that because when you trail run you have more and more stuff and more technical clothes and things like that. But at the beginning, if you just go on the mountain, as I did when I was hiking, you just need to have shoes and walk, and it's quite simple. Everybody can do it. You don't have rules to follow. You just need to walk. So this is what
you
I
have
love.
to know where to hike, right? Because if you just go to the mountains, like you would go for a run to a park that is nearby, I don't think it's the same, right?
It's not the same, but in France we have and in Europe we have a lot of I will mostly talk about France because I'm not an expert on the other mountains, but in France you have the flags that are painted on the trail. So when you go for a hike, you have many directions indicated with time estimated. For example, this point is at 30 minutes, this point is at 1 hour and a half, and it's something that France developed many years ago. That so you don't need to be a good mountaineer. You just have to follow the flags that are painted on trees, on stones, and so it's quite easy.
Okay, and have you ever run you surely did run on a normal surface on a
flat?
Yeah, on a flat surface.
It came after.
Okay.
I was hiking and then I wanted to, so I switched to trail running, and then I wanted to, for example, increase my performance, and I start to run in flat floor, but it is just a mean for trail running. and I usually not just run in flat floor because I don't find what I like in the mountain, like the nature, the calm, the thing like that.
Okay. And when did you decide to be? Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot something I love about mountains. It's that you're super small, and I love it. So when you are at the top of a mountain, it's just this moment when you feel like wow, it's huge around me, and I'm just here, little thing here, and I can just appreciate this hugeness. For example, a whole city from behind, and you are like, wow, it's amazing. So sometimes you see very small thing like a little pharmacy. I forgot the word in English, sorry. But you see little things or little car or the tramway and things like that, and you're like, okay, it's just here, and I'm small, and there is this whole thing in front of me.
Yes, above all, I think it's the nature that you see that is so immense. Like the world around you is so immense, and you're just a little person that can be surrounded by all that, and you can try to conquer the nature, but I don't know. I don't like you're not as strong as everything that surrounds you. So yeah, I agree that mountains are incredible, and they show you like nothing else how big the nature actually is. And I think with trailing, I've never actually tried trail. But I think it might be, I run on a flat surface though. But I think that it's very incredible that you have this opportunity to not only be excited because you can go for a run and you have the endorphins that are related to the physical activity, but also you get to interact with the nature in this form where it's really big and it surrounds you. And I think it must be very amazing to have the opportunity to do that on a daily basis, as you can living in this surrounding.
Yes, so there is what you just said, and there is that also the fact that in mountains, small distances can induce big changes. Sometimes for example, in a flat floor, you can run 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers, and it will still be a flat floor and a street and something like that. So there is not a big differences. And in mountains, sometimes 2 kilometers is another valley, and I'm just call the word in English, a paysage.
Landscape?
The landscape,
yeah.
Sorry, the landscape is completely different. The trees are completely different. There are animals that weren't there before. So yes, in very few, in small times, sometimes in 20 or 30 minutes, it can be completely different, and this is something that you don't find on flat floor, in my opinion.
Okay, and tell me, when did you decide to become a trainer? So when did you decide to make trail? Because now trail is your main activity, right?
Yes, exactly. So now I have two activities. I have a media that is dedicated to trail running and performance in trail running. So where I do scientific popularization about scientific paper that talk about trail. And in the other hand, I have a small company that propose training to people that want to increase their performance. And I decided to switch to it when I quit academia. When I thought that, I don't like the work of being a researcher, of being an assistant professor, more precisely, because I think a researcher is different from assistant professor. And there is a big difference, I think. So when I decided to quit assistant professor, I thought, okay, I did sports science. So I like trail. I want to, my passion became my work. And I think like that I will match a more balanced life.
Okay. And what is the difference between assistant professor and the researcher, in your view?
In my point of view, but I think everybody will not agree with me. But this is why what I experienced and why one of the main reasons I quit. A researcher is a work 100% dedicated to research, and you have to do research. So you have to do stuff around research to be more efficient as a researcher, for example, grant request. But your work is researching. Assistant professor, it's for me the opposite. Everything is evaluated on your research capacity, but nothing is done to be a good researcher. So there is no good training to be a good researcher. And when I say a good researcher is doing good science, being ethically fair, or adopting good practices. The management of the time, there is a lot of activities that are asked to you, that are expected, that are not related to research, and that prevents you to do research. And when you combine all these things, you, as many researcher, how can I say it? Your time is full. Your working time, your normal working time is full of activities that are not related to research, and then you have to find time to do good research, to do research.
Because when you're assistant professor, you also teach class, or?
So there is the teaching classes, and there is administrative things. So, for example, managing a degree, managing activities of the lab that are not really related to research, but, for example, assist meeting about something that will maybe become true in 2 or 3 or 5 years. So, just attend meetings that are not related to research. And as many researchers, I arrived at the moment where the only moment I can do research was, for example, the weekend, because the week I didn't find the time, because there is classes, so I wanted to be a good teacher, so I spend a lot of time doing research, teaching, and because the university in France is often a very difficult situation, and everybody told you that we need someone to do these classes additionally to your normal classes time, so you try to help the thing and you get more classes, and there is no one to go to this meeting, so you try to be nice and to work with everybody, so you go too. And so at the end of the day, I didn't have any time for research, and so you do it the weekend.
And do you think that now, if you had the opportunity to have a research position in Grenoble, would you apply for it, or you've already decided to quit and it's not possible for you to apply for a different position?
No, I don't think I would. This is a question I asked myself, because the work will be the same, the position will be the same everywhere, and there will still be this issue about bad practices in science that are a main reason I quit. If you want, I can give a brief history about it. When I arrived in my postdoc position, I had absolutely no knowledge about good practices. I was a researcher that did research, and I did research as I was taught to. And I arrived in a lab where I was asked to do things, and that surprised me. I wasn't taught in this way, so I asked myself, is it a good practices, or is it normal, and I just don't know this practice? And I discovered what is called questionable research practices, and open science and things like that. And so I began to be more and more invested in open science and good practices in science. It was in 2019, something like that. So then and many people didn't know about these practices.
So you mean that you, until the moment that you finish your PhD, you've never heard about the good research practices?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
But I think
incredible.
Yes, but I think so. For the context, it was in 2015. I began my PhD. I finished in 2018. So it was really, in sports science, it was really the beginning of open science and things like that. We heard about it once because I had a colleague in psychology, and psychology was more advanced on this question than, for example, sports science. But I never heard about it. And another reason I didn't heard about it is because in my lab, there was predominantly good practices. There was exception. Now I realized with few years of learning things about good practices, but most people adopted good practices. So when you are a PhD, you do your PhD, you have good practices around you, so you don't really...
I think it's also very domain specific.
Exactly.
Because I think if you're... I have a background in cognitive science, so we had a lot of scientific methodology on our studies, and this is the like central to the majority of courses I think that you have in neuroscience or in psychology, but it's true that in sports science or in similar fields, it's not as evident, and very often it's being overlooked, I think.
Yes, it is very domain specific. This is what I realized years after, when I began to create, for example, the name was reproducibility. It was a moment where we chat with other researchers about good practices around an article, and there was a huge gap between fields. Psychologists that was very aware about what we were discussing, and people, for example, in physiology in my lab that never heard about it, and for them, for example, doing a sample size estimation was absolutely not a thing important. So there is a really big gap between the field. So yes, I learned about it, just to catch up with what I was explaining. I learned about it. I get invested in it during all my career research. So I created, for example, meeting moment with different people, PhD student, researcher, because I wanted to target the different level of a researcher career. So like that, the tutor, the teacher can teach better practices, and the young know good practices. So everybody like that knows that. And I slowly realized that university are not really interested. The university I met, so only 3, but the university I met was not really interested about it. They was mostly interested in open access, because you are more cited when you get open access, but not about good practices. And assistant professor, associate professor mostly don't care, because it implies very often it implies changing practices, and it's not something that the elder wanted to do. So the only people that was interested about it was PhD student that very often came to me when I gave lecture about it, because I created a PhD training program, and told me, okay, but my supervisor asked me to do it. What should I do? And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know. So when I met all these things, it really questioned me about my role in university, about good practices, and I just face it that bad practices are more strong and will mainly not change. So if I am a researcher tomorrow, it will not change. And I thought that the only reason that will make me go back to research, it will be, for example, if someone asked me on a position dedicated to good practices and things like that, because when in a position where you are not dedicated to good practices, you have to do good practices thing and your work. Okay. If there is one that combine both, I don't know, maybe I will think about it, but I'm really not sure.
Okay, very interesting. I didn't know that there is a big problem in the scientific world, at least in your domain. Okay, I wanted to talk to you also about your thesis, the thesis you wrote, because I think that the subject of it is quite central to the topic that you want to discuss in the scope of this podcast, which is healthy habit making. Your thesis work is about implementing a change in behavior, right, towards a healthy practice. So understood as physical activity or avoiding unhealthy behaviors. As if I understood correctly, then you can correct me if I'm wrong. And you took into consideration 2 factors. So one was the self-control, and the other was compensatory health beliefs. Yes. So what do you understand by the compensatory health beliefs, and what do you understand by the self-control? And what could you tell me about your thesis work?
So I will begin with the compensatory health beliefs, because it is quite simple, and I work on it I guess only on one paper. So it is not really my field of expertise, so I can have a brief discussion about it. Compensatory health beliefs are the belief that an unhealthy behavior adoption can be compensated later by a health behavior adoption. So for example, I can snack something very sugar red if it's okay, because this evening I will run. And running the healthy behavior will compensate the unhealthy behavior, the snacking that is super sweet. So this was the main topic of this study I did, and I did this study for a particular reason. I did my PhD on a hospital where people with cardiovascular disease came, and the strongest belief they had is that the medication can compensate the unhealthy behavior the healthy behavior they was not adopting. So for example, it's okay if I smoke, I will take my medication this evening. It's okay if I don't run, I will this weekend I will, or walk, because for them walking was already great. I will take my medication. And this is something that came really from the field, from the real life. And while discussing with my co-supervisor that was from pharmacology, we thought that this might be interesting to investigate on this particular population. But I only did one study about it.
Okay, and what was your hypothesis?
The hypothesis was that compensatory health beliefs would diminish the intention for the good behavior and the good behavior adoption. It was verified. It
was confirmed.
We were not able to measure the behavior, so we only focused on the intention, and we confirmed that. The point was that when people thought that, so it was quite not weird as result, but interesting. The compensatory health belief had the worst effect on the people that has the strongest confidence on their ability to do the good behavior. And our idea, it was quite surprising, and our idea was that it was because it was false optimistic people. So it was people that never did physical activity, that just arrived at the center and that say, yes, 7 and 7, I'm fully able to do physical activity, 3 hours per week. And we thought, okay, it's quite weird because these people never did any, and they are very fully, they really trust strongly their capacity, their ability to do it.
So it's as if they have like this instant, they have this view of themselves that they will do it, mm-hmm. but it's very short term. They can't really live up to the promise they make to themselves.
Mm-hmm. And there was that, and we thought that it was also because there was really influenced by health practitioners that was telling them a lot, scary message. And this is something I met on the hospital. The many medical staff work on fear. So now you had a heart problem, a stroke or something like that. If you don't do physical activity, you will die. Do you know it? And it was very repeated. And I thought, okay, yes, maybe if you repeat me this 10 times per day, I will say, okay, I'm very able to do physical activity. So we find this weird interaction on the statistics that say that compensatory health belief had the worst effect on intention on people that were the most able, that thought themselves as the most able to do physical activity, for example. So it was quite weird, but we had this effect on some people where compensatory health belief are not the good a good psychological process to go to physical activity, for example.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any idea what to do about that? Like, because there is in the entire population, I think there is this mechanism that people think, oh, well, I work out, so now I can eat the entire bag of chips, or I can order pizza or whatever. Mm-hmm. So do you have an idea what can we do to overcome this way of thinking?
For me, this belief is absolutely not an issue if you do it in the opposite way. For example, I often do that. I can't be sedentary because I did my workout. So you don't begin by the unhealthy behavior. For example, I snack something unhealthy, and then I will this evening maybe do the physical activity. But you do the opposite. I want to snack something healthy, okay, but I go for my run. And I did the good behavior, and now I can have the unhealthy one. So I think it is more healthy in this way because there are some compensation. So for example, if you do physical activity, you have a calories deficit, things like that. So if you eat something sweet, it's less unhealthy if you run before than not. The issue with compensatory health belief is that often the behavior that is supposed to compensate is later and is most often not adopted. So if you want to do it, just do it in the reverse way. Just do the good behavior before and then enjoy something.
Okay, I understand. And what about the self-control part? Because you also did some studies on the capacity of self-control. Can you explain what is self-control? Why is it so important in the scope of your research? And what do you know about that?
Yes, so I think this time it will be more easy because self-control is really was my field of expertise. Self-control, in very simple word, is so just to take back the image of the balance, is your ability to equilibrate a balance. In the approach I have and the literature I know about self-control, it is your ability to deal with motivational conflict. So when you have a motivation for a behavior and I'm looking for the good word, an incompatible immediate behavior motivation. So for example, if right now I would like to eat something, there could be two options. I can eat something sweet, for example, a chocolate bar, or I can eat an apple. And I will most probably not eat both. I have to choose. And the two motivations are immediately incompatible, because if I eat one, I will not eat the other one. And one serves the health behavior motivation, and the other one is for the unhealthy behavior. The one is very satisfactory immediately, very pleasant because it's chocolate, it's sweet, and the other is satisfactory in the long run because it will give me health benefits. So immediately the two motivations are opposite, in opposite direction, and not compatible. And I have to deal with it. And self-control is your ability to deal with it in the good way. There is no good way, but just to simplify, in the good way, in favor of the healthy behavior. This is what we wrote on my last paper of my research career. Just to deal with it on the healthy way, and compensatory health belief are the way to deal with it in the unhealthy way. So self-control is a whole set of strategies that you and I can adopt on a situation to deal with opposite motivation. And my idea about self-control and everything we did with my colleagues on this research area was with the basic idea that no motivation are ever alone. So all the research in health behavior has been done as motivation operates in a world isolated where nothing else exists out of, for example, intention for physical activity. And my thought was that, okay, there is motivation for physical activity and it could be super strong. But in real life, when you will come back from your work, you will have your intention for physical activity, but you will have many things that can disrupt this motivation. It's late, you are tired, the sofa, it's school, and there is this Netflix series that you want to finish. So there is, and you like physical activity because there is not a thing that disrupt the motivation. There is also a thing that will help the motivation for the behavior. And the main idea I had on my research field was that every behavior is the result of different forces interacting on a situation. And at a moment, some forces, the balance fell in for a behavior or for another one. And self-control is here to help the balance to fail for a behavior or to, I don't know in English, wait for a behavior and not another one.
And do you have any idea? I like this concept. I think it's very true. I think it's very intuitive above all, because it's also, I find it very maybe frustrating that very often in science you have those things which are taken in separation, right? And when you're studying something as complex as, for example, health behaviors, there are so many factors to take into account. So I think that your approach is very interesting. And then, we have this, I know, like three for going to for a run and 2 against. And then there is the self-control that can help us decide and orient us towards the healthy behavior. And do you have any ideas or thoughts about what does this self-control depend on? So why there are some people who have the higher self-control and why there are some people who have lower sense of self-control?
So another idea we have is that self-control is, I wanted to approach self-control as something that is not only but mostly depending on the situation and not on the individual. because as my focus was on health behavior.
On the environment.
No, not the environment, the moment. You in a situation, the individual, but at a particular moment. So I was interested in within person variation, intra-individual differences, and not between person, inter-individual differences. Because my purpose was help people do more physical activity. So if I conduct a study and I saw that there are, for example, a good self-controller and bad self-controller, and it is something that is fixed, I
can't do anything about it.
I can't do anything about it. I will not change individual personality. So my research doesn't serve anything.
Yeah, it doesn't apply.
Exactly. So I wanted to work on a within person thing. And we published a paper that proposed that self-control in a moment, in a situation, depends on three main psychological determinants. It was your perception of energy, your resources, how much, my definition of resources, there are many, but my definition of resources was the quantity of energy you perceive to have for a self-control decision, for a decision in favor of the good behavior compared to the unhealthy behavior. So it was the first thing, a very energetic aspect of self-control. There was another one, the willingness, self-control willingness, motivation, how much, in what extent you are motivated to do this self-control act, for example, the self-control decision to activate self-control. And the last one was the self-control capacity. It was more the cognitive processes, how much they are in the situation able to activate strongly or not. And so when you combine these three concepts, the energy for self-control, your willingness for self-control, and your capacity, your cognitive capacity for self-control, it results in a self-control act, in an action that in a self-control strategy that is more or less strongly activated to help you take the decision for the health behavior, or that is not strong enough to, and so the unhealthy behavior will win.
Okay, so we have those three components, and can we train ourselves to make them optimal? So can we somehow impact those three components, or they are not really dependent on us? They are just dependent on what we're going through the day, or I don't know, our past maybe. Mm-hmm. What is your view on that? What do those three components depend on?
So I don't know what are the determinants of the determinants.
Yeah.
So, but what we knew is that if we take the literature that is very widespread, but with components that looks like the components we discuss, you can find some things. For example, you can find things that helps individual feel more energy, and it's not energy specific to self-control. It's not self-control resources, but when you read energy for the self and you read self-control energy for the self, it is similar. And for example, research show that if an individual just, for example, have a little break of 3 minutes, closed eyes and with deep breathing, but then thereafter there is more feeling of energy compared to individual that didn't. So this is the first idea. For example, if at the moment you have to make some decision, maybe just have a moment calm, very small before, and then it will help you.
Okay. So, and what about the motivation? Do you know what can we do when we lack the motivation?
So regarding the self-control willingness, you mean? I'm just thinking 1 second because I don't know many things about it, I guess. Right now, I'm sorry, but I will have no answer because I have no idea in what extent you can train self-control motivation or willingness.
Okay.
So yes, the first step where I stopped research, I was at the moment where I wanted to test this model and to evaluate if it works, if it predicts the behavior or not, before training anybody on anything. So is
this motivation that is a part of this 3-component model? Is it different from the motivation that we call what we call an everyday motivation to do things? Is there a difference? Or?
Yes, for me there was just two motivation to consider, maybe 3, but let's say 2. There was the motivation for the behavior, that is for the behavior itself, and that depends on the behavior and the motivation for the self-control. That is not exactly the same, because motivation for physical activity is something, but motivation for resist the desire to be on the sofa and be physically active is not exactly the same thing, because the self-control act is in itself a behavior. It's a behavior that is supposed to lead you to another behavior.
Okay, I see.
So, yes.
So there you talk about the motivation in the scope of the moment where I take the decision to do something or not to do something. So there I have some kind of motivation that is within my decision process.
Yes.
And then the more general motivation I might have or not have to go for a run or to wake up in the morning is something more global.
Yes, there was motivation that creates the conflict. So, for example, motivation for physical activity and motivation for sedentary activity, and both that can, for example, if both are strong, they will conflict. And when they conflict, you have the motivation for resolving the conflict.
Okay.
Because, so this was my hypothesis. So if there is no motivation, it is super easy to engage in the less effortful behavior. So, for example, the sofa, or the more pleasant one. And if you have motivation, maybe you can try to resolve this conflict for the health behavior in the long run.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. Hey, if you're still listening, that means that you enjoyed this podcast. We love sharing with you, speaking with our guests, and we are happy to bring all this information to you for free. However, if you like what we're doing and you wish to support our work so that we may keep developing this project, visit our website, hhpodcast.buzzsprout.com, and click the support button to make a donation. You can also follow us on Instagram or subscribe us on YouTube. And don't forget to show our podcast to a friend or a family member if you like it. All the links are available in the description of this episode. And now, back to our conversation. So the other thing I wanted to discuss with you is also related to what we've just discussed regarding the energy, the resources, the energy resources that we might have. There is this concept that you can find in science that is called ego depletion. Can you explain what is it?
Ego depletion, I get passionate by ego depletion when I was doing research, because it mixed with two passions I had on research. The first one was on health behavior change, and the other one was on good practices in science. And when I found the ego depletion field, I get 100% passionate by it because it has been, it can resolve or explain in a certain manner the unhealthy behavior adoption, and the current state of the art, the current state of the literature is full of researches with bad practices, and it is one of the fields that really turn on the light on bad practices in psychology. I really think that the moment where people said, okay, in psychology we have issue with good practices and good research, it was because of ego depletion research.
Okay, yeah, because maybe I will just explain what I've heard about ego depletion. So in general, it's this idea that when we engage our resources, so for example, when we concentrate hard on a task, or when we engage our attention in something that we don't like or which we don't like, then we will not have enough cognitive resources to say no to, for example, an unhealthy snack, or we will just be more eager to indulge in something that we shouldn't indulge in. So there was the study, and it was in in the 90s, where they showed where there were two groups of people. So they either were said that they can't eat chocolate chip cookies, or they said that they can't eat the radishes, which were next to it. And then they had to engage in this very complicated problem-solving task, which was impossible to solve. And they were measuring how soon will the people get frustrated. So when will they give up? And the hypothesis is that because of ego depletion, the people who were refused eating the chocolate chip cookies, they will give up sooner, because they had to engage in resisting the temptation to eat the cookies, right? And this is like the base study, I think, that was published. And ever since, there is this hypothesis that we have a limited amount of willpower and we have a limited amount of those resources. But then, from what I've heard, there is some controversy related to that, right?
Yes. So what you explain is exactly the basic of ego depletion. And if we want to simplify, the very basic of ego depletion is that self-control is a muscle. If you use it once, then it's tired. And this is the whole theory. If you use it as a muscle, you do an exercise, you do an effort in self-control, and then if you try to do it again just after, it is exhausted and it is more difficult and over and over. So this was the idea, and the main idea was on self-control. So if you do a self-control act once, so you choose apple instead of chocolate bar, then if you have to do it again, for example, a few minutes after, it will be more difficult to do it again. And if you do it again, it will be even more difficult. So this was the main theory. And the hypothesis was that this behavioral choice difficulty results from a resources depletion. This is ego depletion at the origin. And the first way it has been tested, it is exactly as you said. You ask people to do a self-control thing in the first time. So for example, choose apple or chocolate. Then you ask them to do something that is absolutely not related to self-control. For example, a cognitive task, a puzzle or a labyrinth or whatever. And then you ask them to do again a self-control act. And for me, since the very first experimental design, there was an issue because the manipulation in the experimental group, not in the control, but in the experimental group, is not related to self-control. It is just related to your cognitive processes, to your mind. You just have to think and try to do a puzzle. And so if the theory is about self-control, it has for me to manipulate self-control. And if it's about cognitive or mental fatigue, it has to manipulate mental fatigue things. But it cannot overlaps. If it overlaps as it has been done on the very first study, then why is it called ego depletion? There was a whole field working on mental fatigue and cognitive fatigue since the 1950s or 60s, something like that, and we don't need a new word for it. So for me, because the theory was on self-control, we had to test if self-control does get tired, if the self-control exhaustion is something specific, not similar to mental and cognitive fatigue. Because if it is similar, we don't need a new word. So this was the main idea of what I worked on. And we tried to publish this theory and this paper. And so, yes, I forgot one thing. One hypothesis was that it was a resource depletion. So people doesn't have any more resources to do self-control act. But the original author, Roy Baumeister, wasn't clear about what are these resources. So it is a resources, but we don't know which one. And another field of the literature, more led by Michael Inslicht, thought that it is more a willpower issue. So it's not a resource issue, but a motivation, a willingness issue. So there was these two competing hypotheses. Both has been investigated separately and mostly through opinion paper and theoretical paper. And never any study tried to confront both concepts to evaluate them and see if one is better than the other. So this was the main issue. And yes, so this was the main issue. And what we wanted to do when we published our paper in 2022, I guess, was not to say ego depletion, or we call it that self-control fatigue, to be just more accurate about what we are talking about. It is not a depletion, because depletion means complete exhaustion of something. And for example, you don't have to be completely exhausted to be tired. You can just have a 10% reduction and you are tired. So we wanted to use the word fatigue. And also because fatigue in sports science implies different mechanisms. And so we use the word self-control fatigue to end this paper about self-control fatigue to say, okay, ego depletion might be a thing. It might also not exist at all. But if we want to know, and this was my purpose in the health behavior change theory overall, if we want to know it whole, we have to investigate it seriously, rigorously. So we published this paper when we proposed a process with the 3 components we discussed before. So the 3 components get in action, the self-control act number 1 get in action, then you have the self-control act number 2, and because of the process that are diminished, the second self-control act is supposed to be less efficient than the first one. So
what was the task? What was the self-control act?
So the self-control act for me was required to be related to self-control. So for example, to conflict resolution. So for example, choosing apple instead of chocolate bar. It has to be related in a way.
What did you in the study that you conducted? What was the task?
I did not conduct the study because I quit research
okay.
just before, and I asked. So yes, I stopped my research
So we'll
career.
never know.
I will not be the author that.
But they will continue.
Yes, I hope people will do it. But what we proposed is very simple to begin. What I proposed is propose to individual a task, for example, on a computer, where you have two options and you always have to choose the option that usually you don't like. For example, there is this mouse tracking task when you just with your finger, so it is a movement of the hand, and I like it in the cognitive process. You move your hand, and when the mouth on the screen cross a line, you have two options that appears, for example, an apple and a chocolate bar, and you always have to go to the apple. So, and you do it repeatedly on the task. So it means that you simulate, it is not the real life, but you simulate a recurrent choice, a repeated choice for something healthy compared to something that is super sweet, super tasty, but unhealthy. And so you do it a lot of time, and then you assess if the people in real life, for example, is better or not at choosing the chocolate bar or the apple. So this was the main idea we proposed. Ask people to do a self-control task where they have to choose.
But it was on a computer screen.
Yes, exactly.
So do you think it will work the same way when it's on a computer screen and not when it's a real object that you actually can eat?
For me, it will work, but with really smaller effect sizes than in real life. Because if you really can choose a lot of a real chocolate or apple, it will not be the same. But there is this issue that it could be quite difficult on the lab to, for example, ask an individual to choose several times about a sweet bar or something like that. So there was a lot of question regarding the experimental design that we can apply, really or not. But one of the ideas was to first simulate choices on a computer and then propose a real choice, a single real choice on the lab. We had this idea. This is what I proposed because just before quitting, I submitted a big grant for a PhD position about it. And I proposed to do exactly the same thing with physical activity. So the people, the participant will not choose between apple and the chocolate, but between physical or sedentary activity. And after that, they will have to choose to do an activity that is either active or inactive, but maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that I was super smart with this idea. Individual will have to do both in the lab. So in the lab they would absolutely in the study I thought adopt both behavior. But what will change is the order of the behavior they will do. What I wanted for the participant in the study, I thought, is to choose between the order physical activity and then sedentary one, or sedentary activity and then physical one. And my hypothesis was that if I fatigue them with repeated choice for physical activity over sedentary in the first computerized task, they will prefer to be sedentary in the first place and then maybe do physical activity, but they will postpone physical activity. So this was my thought, and I never conduct the study.
Okay, I understand. I wanted to ask you regarding, because I understand that you think that self-control was not actually measured in the original study by Baumeister. So why do you think he got the effect? Yeah.
Just to not to correct, but to be more accurate, they measured self-control as a result of the experimental manipulation. So for me, the measure task is good because people will have to choose. They had to choose between two options, one tempting and one not that tempting. But for me, the issue was the manipulation task that was not related to self-control.
So the problem-solving task.
Exactly, that is not related to self-control.
But then they did get the results, they did get the results which said that people would give up more quickly if they were in the group where they had to exert self-control. So how would you explain that?
For me, this result is So first we have to replace the result in the year. It is in 1998, the result. And for me, there is many reason that could make us doubt about the reliability of this study. Just for I don't want to be very statistically accurate or things like that, but I try to calculate the effect size because we talk a lot of the effect sizes. Yeah, an effect size is just how much an effect is big or small. This is all. And when I calculated by hand what they found, because it's super easy to calculate an effect size, for example, a QND, if you have the mean and the standard deviation, it was something like, I don't know, 5 or 6. And most psychological effects are around 0.4. And here in this study, the effect was at 6, not 0.6, 6. And I thought, okay, many studies didn't succeed at replicating this effect, but the effect is supposed to be 6.
Okay. So you thought that there is something that's...
Yes, an effect size of 6 is something like running with 2 legs or running with no legs, and you compare the speed. So it's huge. So there is things that can make us question the original result. But I don't have the data, so I can check. Let's say the results are true. For me, it's a very interesting result in the mental fatigue field.
Because you think that it's not possible that the fatigue that we have from exerting self-control can translate into mental fatigue. You think the two don't overlap?
Yes, I think they overlap, but more in the other direction. If you have mental fatigue, you can have self-control fatigue. But if you have self-control fatigue, because self-control fatigue is really related to motivational choices, I'm not sure it will spread to mental fatigue.
Okay.
And the other fact is that with all the respect I can have for Baumeister work, mental fatigue researcher was working on it since many years, and the very traditional task on mental fatigue is like something like 1 hour, 1.5 hours of repeated cognitive tasks that is super demanding. And here there is like a puzzle of 6 minutes, and it's supposed to have bigger effect than on mental fatigue. So there is 2 options. Mental fatigue research was wrong since 30 years, or ego depletion is not for the moment enough accurate to investigate correctly the effect they want to investigate. So for me, there is overlap. This is what we propose, that self-control fatigue is a type of mental fatigue that is affectively charged. And it is very important for me to keep it in mind, because mental fatigue is really a process where just your cognitive abilities are reduced and there is no motivation. For example, you try to focus and you just can't anymore because your cognitive area related to it doesn't activate as good as before, and there is many evidence in this direction. In self-control fatigue, there is the fact that there is motivation, an affectively charged thing. So you have to, for example, you will choose something sweet that is pleasant, like be on the sofa or eat something sweet, compared to do something that is effortful, do physical activity, run while it's cold outside and maybe rainy, or eat something that is not as tasty. And for me, what was important on that is that on the real life, mental fatigue results from hours of work and things like that. And I was interested in why people in a situation very quickly are not able anymore to choose the healthy behavior. And for me, if it results of 2, 3, 4 hours of cognitive task, it doesn't apply on real life. In real life, you have someone that say, okay, I don't want to eat for example, the best example, I don't want to smoke this cigarette. And 2 minutes after, there is the other opportunity of smoking a cigarette, and they say no. And at the third opportunity, they do it. So it is very brief. There is no 3 hours of cognitive resisting the temptation. It is 1 or 2 times. So this is why I found that the affective charge that is present on self-control fatigue and that doesn't exist on mental fatigue, because, for example, it's puzzle task or mathematic algorithm to solve, the affects that are present here make the process quicker, faster and stronger, but related only to the behavior.
Yeah, and then also, even if we take the example of doing a physical activity after work, for example, it's not that because you're so tired that you won't go for a run, because I don't know, very often when I'm tired after thinking for 7 hours straight, I'm thrilled to go for a run because it's actually a way to relax, it's a way of relaxing your mind, and not necessarily something that would require a lot of self-control. I mean, that would cause a lot of fatigue. So this is also a situation that is not very well explained by the model that you've explained before.
Yes. So for me, the part that just to connect to what you just said, if we go back to the process, you have the three components, and the three components can be diminished by other real life context and things that happen. Because, for example, if I talk with very cognitive terms, if your ability to inhibit overall is diminished by a day of work, it will directly diminish your ability to resist to the sofa, for example. But for me, as I just said before, it's not because you resisted to sofa, or it's not because it's difficult to resist to the sofa. Then overall you cannot resist anymore. But if overall you are not able anymore to resist to anything, then it will be difficult to inhibit the sofa. Yeah. So for me, there is this process, and I don't know if I really answer your question, but for me, the example you just gave is an example about the overall process. After a long day of work, your cognitive executive function, for example, inhibition, are diminished, and so the decision for sofa or not sofa is diminished. Your ability to decide on a situation is diminished. And this is why I thought that the other way around is not that likely.
And what about the situation? How would you explain the situation where I'm sitting all day at home? And I think that, well, today I want to engage in some kind of physical activity. So I make a plan. I will go play basketball with, my friend, or tennis, whatever. But then, like, after a couple of hours, it's not that I've engaged in anything that I'm tired or whatever. Just I don't feel like doing that. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, sometimes you have those days where you're planning to do a sports activity, but you spend so much time sitting around, not really engaging in anything, and so then you're just powerless and you don't want to go out anymore. So how would you explain this kind of situation in the framework that you've explained?
One issue with the answer I will give is that it can sound like a confirmation bias or something like that. So I don't have any data, so I don't know. But
I'm asking about your opinion.
Yes. For me, it will be a resource issue. So you just used all your resources, for example, your energy, your motivation to work hardly on a task, and then when you have to go out, you are at home. It's warm. It's quite comfortable. You can just sit here and chill. And so it will be quite difficult because you don't have any more resources and motivation to dress up and go for an effort. For me, this was the main idea I will have.
Okay. I wanted to ask you whether you use this knowledge that you have about motivation and about why you might not want to go for a trail today, whether you use this knowledge in your own life.
This is very funny because there is one thing we didn't discuss. For the moment, the discussion, I love this discussion, but we didn't talk about the self-control act. And the self-control act, so the action of self-control in order to promote the healthy behavior compared to the unhealthy one, can be different strategies. For example, you can choose to inhibit and use your inhibition and resist the temptation. And it is a self-control act, inhibition. And for example, I am not a good resisting person, so I can decide to switch my mind. For example, try to think about good consequences. It is not inhibition, it is focusing on benefits. It is another self-control strategy. And the self-control act can be different, and all the individual, in my knowledge of the literature, I didn't work exactly on it, but what I know of the literature is that there is a whole set of strategies that an individual can use or that prefer to not use. For example, there are inhibitors, there are switchers and things like that. And in my daily life, I try to say, okay, what are the strategies I'm good at? So for example, I know that I'm good at resisting. If I take an example that is super stupid, I'm very fan of fries chip for the aperitif. And I know that if there are a lot in front of me, I'm lost. I will add the whole package. So what I do is that I try to not engage in a self-control act that is effortful, that require a lot of resources and willingness and things like that. But I try to find the strategies that are easy for me. For example, not seeing the whole package is super easy for me. If I don't buy one, or if it is not something that I will see at a moment where I know it is difficult, for example, around 7 p.m., something like that, I know that I will not have to engage in a self-control act, and then it's fine. Another example could be I really love video games and playing, and the Saturday is a good day to spend the day on the sofa and play a video game. But I also like trail running and I like to train myself. So what I try to do is to immediately choose the self-control strategy that is easy for me, that works for me, and that doesn't require all these components and all the resources. Because for me, when you do a self-control act, is that you lost at a moment. You failed in adapting your environment to not be in this last emergency situation where you have to use self-control. So I try to not use self-control and plan strategies before self-control situation where.
And do you use, for example, the chips or the video games as a reward for yourself?
Exactly. So for example, for the video game, I say, okay, I love video game and I would like to play it. So let's trail run right now. And when I come back, I know that I will play, I don't know if it's 4 hours, I don't care, because I already did the behavior, the good behavior, the healthy behavior. So I try to just find the strategies that are behavior specific, because for example, for the chips, I don't use the same strategy as for the video games, but I try to find the strategy that works fine for me to make the optimal choices at the good moment. And to not be in this last moment. I don't know in English, but in French we have this expression dos au mur, the back on the wall.
Yeah.
And I just have to use my self-control with the risk that it gets fatigued.
Okay, so you just have to be a very good planner. You have to plan ahead and not allow a situation.
Yes, so in the opposite, I'm a very bad planner, but I try to, as much as possible, plan things that helps me to. For example, to go to the healthy habits and health behavior compared to the unhealthy ones.
Okay, I see. And when you don't have any motivation, do you sometimes just let go? You say, okay, well, today I don't feel like...
Yes, I just skip. So, many times, because for me...
Or is there something that you say, tell to yourself when you don't have the motivation and you do want to engage in an activity? Do you have a motto, or do you have, I don't know, a ritual that you do when you want to motivate yourself?
So for me, I think I have 3 answers. I hope I will remember the 3. The first one is it's normal to lack motivation. Sometimes it for everybody, even the biggest champion that are the models for everybody, there are many training that they miss. So if they miss training but succeed in being champions, I think anybody that listen to this podcast can miss a run just for health behavior and a good health. It's not an issue. It's an issue when you will miss 3, 4, 5 in a row, but missing a run is not, or a walk or anything you want. For me, it's not an issue. The second thing, I already forgot. I will try to find it.
I was asking about rituals, or maybe some kind of strategies that you take, or something that you tell to yourself, a motto or something like this.
Yes. Another thing you can do for me is to change what you plan for something, for example, more pleasant. Because there is, as I said before, unhealthy behaviors have something for them is that they are most often very pleasant. Eating something sweet is pleasant, the sofa is pleasant, Netflix is pleasant, the most sedentary behavior are super pleasant. And when you have to train, for example, do a difficult training, or you plan a session that could be hard, for example, this is why I'm not a big fan of for health HIIT training, because it's okay, it works for the health, but it is super intense and sometimes it is super disgusting. You don't really like it. So I changed the plan I have to do physical activity, but something more pleasant. I plan to do, I don't know, interval training on the track field, and it is something I don't like because I like to run on the mountains. And I'm really not in a mood, or I don't have the resources, for example, to engage in this one. Instead of being sedentary, I go for something I just like. So it can be a paddle with a friend. It can be a run that is shorter on the mountain. It can be a walk, just a walk. But I will do something, but just something that is more pleasant. And because there is this affect, I moved out the unpleasant thing, and then I can do something, but with pleasure. So for me, it is, yes, I don't remember the third one I wanted to say, but I think these two,
No worries,
two ones are already
great.
Yes, are strategies that I think could work. And yes, just maybe the last one could be just allow ourselves the reward. Just say, okay, I can be sedentary, or I can eat something sweet just before I will do I will eat that frog.
That's what I do sometimes also. I don't feel like doing something, but I'm like, okay, I do it, and then I will have a tasty dinner. And so it works sometimes for me.
Yes, for example, after a trail run, sometimes I say, okay, this evening I will not just have a lunch, a normal one, but I will cook something that is super sweet and I will like it. But I run, I can do it. And sometimes the reward is quite cool.
That's true. How did you start to train people? Did you start with your friends, or did you just, how did it happen for you?
Yes, I start with friends, with a friend particularly, when I was not at all ready to change my career. But he needed help and he wanted to progress. And I just read thing about training. And so I said, okay, maybe you can try it. And so it started like that.
Okay, and then he told a friend, and he told a friend, and so you had a group, or?
Yes, he told a friend. So this is how I began with 2 or 3 people. And now, because I have my Instagram and the website and things like that, and because of the video YouTube I do about it, people begin to contact me sometimes to get some training.
And do you have some group trainings, or do you meet with people one-on-one?
No, it's a remote training mostly, because no one is in Grenoble for it, but it's mostly remote. I use a web platform that facilitates it, and it is one by one. So I try to individualize program for people.
But so when it's remote, you mean that you meet people and you tell them what to do, and then they do the stuff that they have to do by themselves. So
yes.
Or they connect with you when they are on a trail.
No, so this is the first option. We have a first meeting. We discuss the objective, what are the plans, what do they want to achieve, what are their strongness or weakness. And I said, okay, maybe you should work that. Then I thought about something. I plan it on the application I use, the software I use, and then they do the training, and I can the training are uploaded on the platform, so I can check it and can discuss about it with them, but everything is remote.
Okay, do you also motivate them? Do you text them every week? Are you done with your training, or you
yes,
don't? Yeah,
I try to, but I don't try to motivate them or tell them, hey, think about your training and things like that. I try to ask them how are they and how was the last training, without put a pressure. I try to be maybe more subtle, or I don't know, but just how are you, how was the last one, okay, and like that. Sometimes I just feel things on the word they use or how they speak, and I try to to my turn find a good word to answer, and that could help them to get motivation. But I don't try to motivate them directly. I try to be more indirect.
Okay. I wanted also it's one of the last things that I wanted to discuss with you. It's how did you prepare? Because I saw on your website that you did the GR20, so GR20. It's a hike, right, that
yes.
you do. It's 150 kilometers from what I saw,
yes.
If I'm correct.
It's a long one.
It's a long one. It's 2 weeks, right? You have 2 weeks to hike 150 kilometers. I wanted to ask you about how did you prepare for it? Why did you choose this particular hike to do? And how was it?
I think I chose it because I'm stupid. And
Is it really difficult?
Yes, it is. It is. It is. Yes, it is very difficult. It is one of the the most difficult trail that exists. So there is always the most difficult, but it is one of the most difficult. And because I like challenge, and when I began to hike, I said, okay, why not try the one of the most difficult? So that was all the point. And two friends was interested in the project, so we did it. We trained, and when I trained for it, it was many years ago, and it was.
When was it?
2012 or 13 or 13. So it was a long time ago. And I think that if I train tomorrow for the GR20, I will do exactly the opposite, and absolutely not what I did, because it was not optimal.
Okay, what did you do? What did you do wrong?
I go for a walk with a very heavy bag once per week, and I thought, okay, because my bag is super heavy, and I do a long walk, so I'm ready for 15 days of long walk. And I think today I will be more kind with me, with other type of training. And yes, I think I will do the thing differently.
And do you think that it was more challenging physically or psychologically?
At this moment, it was more for me psychologically, because I was not used to long walk that are slow. Now I am, and I love it. So this is something I can do tomorrow. Psychologically, I'm more trained for it. But the real difficulty for me was not the physique, because if it's physically too exhausting, you can slow down, and it's fine. But mentally, I was coming from the ski and things like that. I was hiking fast, and in the GR20, you can't hike fast. It's not possible, because it's I don't know. There is accidenté in French. I don't know how you say in English.
Accident?
But, yes. Yeah. All the stones are all over. The trail is not.
It's dangerous. You have a lot of.
Yes, a little bit, but the trail is not clean. So you have stones everywhere. It's not flat at any moment. You have to put your legs where you can, or your feet when you can. So it's not a clean path. And so you have to slow down. And I wasn't ready to accept to slow down at this moment. Now I'm more, I guess.
Okay, I see. And do you have any plans of other how do you say, famous hikes that you want to engage in?
Yes, so it is funny you said that, because it is a thought I had maybe 3 or 4 days ago, but there is the GR76 that is very more flat, but it is also 160 kilometers, and it goes from, what is the name of the city? Above Mâcon, that is at the north of Lyon, to Lyon. So it's a big trail that I can do on winter. And so I thought, okay, why not try to do the whole one in 2 or 3 days in January, for example.
Okay.
So this is.
Will you prepare for it, or do you think that you're prepared because you train a lot and so you're fit?
Currently, I think I'm prepared enough for it, because there is not that much. The real issue in trail running that can make you fail on a project is the elevation gain, and especially the elevation descent down, because it breaks the legs. The up, you can.
I always think that going down is worse. It's way more tiring for me.
Physiologically, it is the worst, and this is the main reason why many people withdraw on trail running. It's because they cannot stand anymore the descent. So, because the trail I imagine right now doesn't have that much descent overall on the 3 or 4 days combined. I think my training level right now is okay for that.
Okay.
So yes.
And what are your goals, professional goals that you might have right now? What are your plans for the future?
It is a mess. because for me it is quite difficult when you came. This is my opinion, but for me it is difficult when you came from academia. That is a path very simple to follow. You just have to, everything you know because you did a PhD. So
I did not yet do a PhD.
Yes, but you started, so you have the thing in mind, I guess. It's when you want to become professor, you have to do a PhD, and you have to publish, then you have to do a postdoc, and you have to apply and get a position. And when you are in the position, you just wait for the salary to arrive and you work. And it is all you have to do is to work a lot. Basically, a PhD, that work a lot and be a bit smart, and it works, I guess. But right now I'm in a job position where I don't have just to work a lot or things like that, but I have to find what to do more precisely to live. Because there is that. It's always great to create content. It's great to create a podcast and talk about things you love. But at the moment, I have to think, okay, but I have to pay my rent and buy food. So this is really the issue I'm facing right now. Okay, I love what I do. With my site is Courir Mieux, and the podcast, everything is Courir Mieux. So run better in English. Yeah. I love what I do. And now I have to think, okay, how can I live with it? So I'm really in a period, because it's only from July. I'm working 100% on Courir Mieux since July. So I am at a moment where I say, okay, I love what I do, but now I have to make choices in a direction that will help me to live from this project and not. So for the moment, it's in French, we say I'm swimming. So I'm
okay.
trying to...
You're trying to figure out
exactly.
What is your next
I'm trying
step.
to figure out and to imagine the monetization, I guess it's the good word, options I have. Okay. And the one I should withdraw.
Okay, one last question that I ask everyone who's appearing on the podcast is, do you have an event? Is there something that happened in your life that you think has shaped you the most?
Right now, because I'm quite sure that this answer can change depending on the situation. Probably. And
definitely.
So right now, I think that the moment that changed me the most is when for the first time, I run up a mountain.
Okay.
Because how can I say in English? Because it gave me many positive things. I received.
You felt empowered.
Yes, exactly, and just fine. Not obviously empowered, but just fine. Like, okay, it's good for me, and it is something that really changed my mind in many things. That helped me also sometimes when I say, okay, it's not the good moment. What can I do in mountains to just find back a good energy or thing like that? So I think it is one thing that really helped me in my life, and I think there are many others. But this one, the moment when I found this resourcing activity that can be, for some people it's drawing, for people it's music, anyone has its own. But for me, this one, when I found this one, it really, I guess, changed me in a way.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So, Cyril's podcast is Courir Mieux. Mm-hmm. It's also the name of the website. So I will put the links to your website and to your podcast in the description. You have also Instagram profile, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll put all that in the description of this episode. I wanted to thank you very much for this conversation. I learned a lot. It was very interesting talking to you. And I wish you well in your journey and in your plans that you have. I think swimming can also be great. So you just can enjoy the path of going where you want to be.
Yes. Thank you very much for the podcast, and good journey too.
And now I bring you the challenge from our guest. Cyril invites you to try this routine. For the next 2 weeks, find a physical activity and do it twice a week for 30 minutes. But that's not all. After this physical activity, reward yourself with a blissful 30 minutes of your absolute favorite sedentary activity. It's the perfect balance. 30 minutes of active fun, followed by 30 minutes of chill. It's a win-win. Write a comment or let us know on Instagram if you participate in this challenge. Tag us and Cyril and share your story. Good luck!